Welcome to the world of scale modeling with Mike Ashe, where techniques, tips, and creativity come alive with dozens of tutorials, projects, tape-up reviews, and picture references to help you build better scale models and enjoy our wonderful hobby. Welcome to part 14 of our multi-part series on detailing and building the Revell Monogram 148 scale B-17G. In part 14, we're going to do a lot of airbrushing, and I'm going to show you how I do my detail airbrushing and my masking. So, let's get started. All the masking is now complete, and as I've demonstrated on previous projects, I use small strips of masking tape. On this bomber, the edges of the windows are curved, so I used a Waldron punch tool and 2 layers of masking tape, and I just punched out some discs, peeled off the top layer and used the bottom layer of tape and just put 1 disc in each corner, and it worked out great. And all I had to do was use straight pieces of tape to connect everything. So it came out pretty good. I used a lot of tissue in the large open areas in order to seal it up good. And on the underside, you can see how I use liberal amounts of tissue. So it's looking good. We are ready to begin airbrushing. I'll do the underside first. I'll balance this on some balsa wood strips, do the underside, and then when it dries and I flip it, it'll sit on this old landing gear here. The other thing is that the engine cowlings are taped in place so that when I mask the bottom area, the engine cowlings will mask the engine nacelles in terms of the waviness of the light gray areas. So we're ready to go. The assembly's been primed, and I let it dry for 2 days, and I found a few minor flaws along this leading edge, and I sanded them out very carefully. And so now we are ready to begin the process of final painting. It's looking pretty good. And we are ready to go. I will show you what the underside. I'm going to put 2 airbrush coats of the light flat gray on the bottom. I've got to then mask those areas, and then I'll put 2 coats of the olive drab on the top. So as I progress, I will show you how things look. I've got the air injectors for all 4 engines masked, and I use tiny strips and outline the areas of each one of these, and then I use larger strips to cover the surface in case there's any overspray. But I'm going to use real low pressure, probably around 12 to 15 psi, and I'll stand the model up and just spray it right onto it, and just use small bursts, control bursts, with just a really tiny bit at a time, and just kind of walk around each one of these. And with the larger strips, that should protect the surrounding areas from overspray. So I think we're ready to go, and I'll start here, work my way across, and then by the time I'm done here, I can go back and put a second coat on here, because the metallizer, tester's metallizer, dries real quick. And then before I take the tape off and before I polish, I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like, and then I'll demonstrate the polishing technique, and then we'll go ahead and pull the tape off and see how it looks. So we've got 2 coats of the metallizer on here, so let me go ahead and polish one up, and let's see how it looks. Looking pretty good. I'll go ahead and do the others. I'm going to go ahead and switch and get another swab here. And we are looking pretty good. I did put a little more masking tape on here, and I'm glad I did, because at low pressure I forgot that sometimes because the Model Master Model Master metallizer is so thin, sometimes it spits at real low pressure, which is what it did here. So luckily it spit on the tape. And yeah, I like it. Looks good. You'll tone it down a little bit once we get it covered with some clear flat. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the tape off, and then we'll see how it looks. With the tape removed, the injectors look pretty good. I had a little bit of bleeding around the edges where the tape met the injectors, and I think it's because the paint is so thin it just actually bled under the tape. So what I did was I took a fine detail brush and using the airbrush mixture for this medium gray color, just touched it on the tip and let it bleed all along the interior lines here, and it touched it up pretty good. So once I get to the phase of doing some weathering, I'll run some exhaust staining on these 4 areas, and once the bottom is covered with some dark sooty appearance and I do some chipping, it's going to look pretty good. So I'm pleased with the way it came out, and once I get a dull coat on here, it'll soften up this shiny color a little bit. So we're ready to move on to taping the bottom area and preparing it for the olive drab color on the top surface. I've got the areas masked where I painted the flat gray color representing the metal areas on the rudders, the elevators and the aileron here, and then I've masked them off so that I can airbrush a faded flat gray color to represent the fabric control surfaces. Just make sure when you do this that you have the correct underside areas, especially on the aileron. And how I did these masked discs was with my Waldron punch tool, 2 layers of masking tape, and I just punched out the discs, peeled them off of the workbench, and then attached them onto the round inspection plates that are associated with the elevators. And everything's looking pretty good. So now it's time to go ahead and attach these to my airbrush board, and we are now ready to airbrush that light gray color. And then once I'm done and it's dried, I'll go ahead and mask these areas completely, and then I'll be able to flip them over and follow the same procedure for the olive drab color. There'll be an olive drab for metal, a slightly lighter olive drab color for the fabric on the upper control surfaces. So we are ready. I've got the masking tape removed from those areas where I had a darker gray, here, 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 and here. And now I'm preparing it for the lighter and darkened olive drab colors. So first thing to do is to cover the open hinge areas so I don't get any overspray, and then you mask it. So what I'll do here is I'll do the lighter olive drab first, and then mask around here, and then do the regular olive drab color. And I'll do the same thing here. This one doesn't have a separate control surface, small control surface, so this will just be the lighter olive drab on this one, again, after I get it all taped up, I'll shoot the lighter olive drab on this side and then tape around it and shoot the darker color. So we're ready to go on these. I just need to finish masking these. On the propellers, with red, green, and yellow, those colors work better if you put an undercoat of flat white. So there's an undercoat of flat white on here, and then I airbrush the flat yellow onto the tips of these, and then carefully mask the tips. And of course, Revell Monogram has these little raised lines where the yellow tips are, so that it makes it easy to mask them on both sides. I'll put this back on. So there you have it. Now I will airbrush it flat black, pull all the tape off, give it a coat of clear gloss, put the decals on, and then clear flat. And before I put the clear flat on, I'll probably run a silver pencil along the edges here and here and here to represent the wear that usually occurs on propellers, and then give it a coat of flat white. So we are ready to airbrush these flat black. I've got the upper part, olive drab color, for the metal sections of the control surfaces taped up, and once it's airbrushed and I pull all the tape off, I will show you how it looks. But this is how you tape it. You don't forget there's metal along the aileron edges on the inside where they attach to the wing. I noticed that at the last minute here, so I went ahead and taped all that. So you're going to have a darker olive drab, and the areas that are covered will be a lighter olive drab on the fabric colors. So let's go ahead and airbrush it and then pull the tape off. I've got all of the tape off, and the control surfaces came out pretty good. Here are the elevators, and here's the ailerons. So far so good. The upper control surfaces, the olive drab colors, are faded a lot more dramatically because this area gets a lot more sunlight than the underside does. But once I do my mild weathering with pencil pastels, it'll really look good. And I've got to do a little bit of dry brushing, silver dry brushing on these metal areas, but that'll wait till I do the phase associated with weathering. But I really like the way these came out. The masking is done, and the next step will be to paint the upper surfaces olive drab. You can see how I've done this. I'll flip it over in a second, but yeah, it's a lot of masking tape. So when I airbrush it, I'll stand it on its nose, low pressure, and just go slow. Just like this. And I'll get the wings and the inside of the nacelles and the top, and then I'll be able to sit it down and get the sides. So yeah, we're ready. And it took about 3 hours to do all this masking. So, and I made some templates for the fuselage and the engine nacelles. So, and then I traced them onto masking tape and then applied them. And it came out pretty good. So I've used this technique consistently and it works really, really well. So let's airbrush it, and I'll give it 2 coats and we'll see how it looks. I've got 2 coats of olive drab and airbrushed, and it came out pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and take all the tape off, and then when I get ready to do the wingtips and the elevators in the flat red color, I'll just retape those areas. So I'm going to paint flat white first, and then 2 coats of flat red. And then once that's done, then I'll go ahead and I will lighten up the tail here, because this fabric covered, but I'm not going to use the same lighted olive drab color that I used on the elevators, because the elevators get a lot of direct sunlight, which fades that dope color on the fabric pretty quickly, but on the redder, not so much. So it'll kind of be a color between this olive drab, which has not been faded at all, and the light color of the fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and take the tape off, and I'll get back with you, and hopefully it looks pretty good. Okay, I've got all the masking tape off, and it came out pretty good. Kind of hard to do this with this, because this model is so big. I'm going to go ahead and pull off the cowlings, but I'll mark them so I know which cowling goes where. Nice and crisp. The demarcation lines are very sharp. So next up will be to paint the red wing tips, and I'll show you how I do that. But looking pretty good. Sorry you can't see much, but the paint went on really, really well. And I haven't mentioned this previously, but I have a coffee cup warmer. And I learned many, many years ago that the way to get your paint to flow better through an airbrush is to warm the paint. So that's what I do. I loosen the cap from the airbrush jar cap, and I warm the paint until the bottom of the paint bottle, and I touch it on my skin, is hot. And then I close the cap real tight. I shake it up real well, and it's amazing the difference in the quality of the spray that comes out of it when the paint is warm. So I highly recommend that you try that. I think you'll like it. And I do that with rattle cans. That's one of the secrets of getting a good rattle can color. What you do is you warm the paint. And the way you do that is you immerse that rattle can in hot water for about 5 minutes. Shake it up real good, immerse it for another 5 minutes, and then start spraying. And you'll be amazed at the difference. So with that short tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and I'll go ahead and mask the wing tips as well as the elevators. And I'll show you that masking before I paint flat white, and then 2 or 3 coats of flat red. We'll see how it looks. But that's going to provide a real striking appearance to the model. And then I'll do the rudder, and then I will do the de-icer boots on both the wings and the elevators and on the tail here. And then we'll be ready to put a gloss coat on, put the decals on, put a dull coat, and then I will do a light powdering of pencil pastels on the upper surface and the lower surface to blend in the decals and lighten up the color a little bit, and give it a little bit of a battle-worn appearance. on the top for fading and on the bottom for exhaust staining, and then we'll start putting it together. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. I've got the wingtips and the tail set up for masking, and this is how I did it. I'll flip the plane over in a minute and show you the underside. I use liberal amounts of masking tape, but I've never had a problem with overspray because I use liberal amounts of masking tape. And I highly recommend that you do the same. So when I spray this from the top, I'll be able to, I'll come in this way and this way. This is just a flat surface, and then I'll have to spray coming in this way and this way. So we're ready to go. I'm gonna put a coat of flat white, and then that'll act as the base coat. And then I can put 2 coats, possibly 3, of the flat red, and we'll see how it looks. I've got 3 nice light coats on the surfaces, and they came out really, really good. So now I just got to let it dry a little more, and we can go ahead and pull off the tape and see how it looks. I pulled off some of the tape off of this wing here. Let me move this around a little bit. So, and again, using liberal amounts of tape prevents any overspray from damaging the other surfaces. Otherwise, you'd be constantly having to do touch-up. So, yeah, it takes a lot of tape, but you know what? It makes a big difference. So I'll give this about another hour, and then we'll go ahead and pull off all the tape, and we'll see how it looks. I've got all the masking tape off, and it came out pretty good. So the next step is to go ahead and do the taping and masking for the de-icer boots on the main wing and the tail and the rudder. Came out pretty good. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. Liberal amounts of tape work really, really good. So I've got to do the de-icer boot here, 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 and on the main wings. And then we'll do the tail, the rudder, and then the wing lights, the interior ears will be zinc chromate, and we're ready to move to the final phase. We'll do some mild weathering and then start assembling. I've got the main wing de-icer boots painted, and I just wanted to show you how I did the masking on this. I did this on both sides, and here's the underside. I mean, basically what you want to do is make sure that the spray doesn't get past this point. You don't want any overspray. So I did this on both wings, and so now we'll go ahead and we'll take the tape off and see how it looks. With all the masking removed, the demarcation lines between the black and the olive drab are very, very sharp. And this is because I used really good quality masking tape used thin strips to outline the edges, and then built up larger strips as I worked my way back across the wings. So there's nice sharp demarcation lines, and no overspray because I used liberal amounts of tape. So, looking really good. I'm very pleased with the way this came out. And next step will be to mask the leading edges of the tail and the rudder, and then I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like masked off. And again, there'll be big clumps of tape here, and this is the pile of tape that I took off. So yeah, it's a lot of masking tape, but you know what, it looks really, really good. For my masking, I wanted to go over this one more time with you. This is the tape that I use for my fine masking. It's 3M Painter's masking tape, and it's got the red label inside. And this tape is thick enough to where you can actually stretch it over small areas. It's got really good stretch qualities, really good adhesion qualities, and I lay one strip down and another strip over it and use a really sharp number 11 X-Acto blade to cut my edges, so it'll give you nice sharp clean edges. And then for the other areas, I use the Scott's standard masking general purpose tape, and this is the roll that I have now. You can actually buy thicker rolls, which is what I'll probably do later on for another model, but I'm just using this tape to save this tape. And you can see where I use this thinner tape as I built up along the edges of the upper and lower wings in order to protect the surfaces from overspray. So that's how I do my masking, and it has never failed me. I've got a few areas where the paint is rubbed off because of handling it so much, and so I'll go ahead and hit those there and there with some more olive drab. If I try to touch it up with a brush, you're going to see the difference. I can't explain why this happens, but if you airbrush a color and use that exact same color to then touch up tiny areas, it comes out slightly darker. Can't explain why, but it just does. So you just need to be aware of that, and be careful how you do your airbrushing and handling of your model. So again, I'm going to tape these areas back here and over here. I'll airbrush that flat black, and then I'll move on to the next step, which would be the rudder needs to be a lighter olive drab color. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. The aft part of the aircraft was all taped up, and the black came out pretty good. So now it's time to take this tape off and see how it looks. But here again, liberal amounts of tape will make a big difference in terms of not having to do touch-up. So we'll go ahead and take this tape off and see where we're at. Got all the tape removed, and here we go. Nice sharp demarcation lines between the olive drab, the red, and the flat black. Got a little bit of touch up right there and right there, but other than that, looks good. I'm very pleased with the way it's come out. And here's another pile of masking tape. But here again, liberal amounts of masking tape make a big difference. So we'll work on masking the area for the rudder. And I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and mask. Let me turn this over. I'll mask these areas too, so I can do that airbrushing at the same time that I do the rudder. So it's on to more masking, and we are almost done. I've got the airbrushing done, and there's the tail. It's a slightly lighter color of olive drab. And I had touch up here, 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 and then I did the landing lights, wing landing lights. So we are ready to take off the tape, and this should be the last of the touch-up work as well as the airbrushing. So if all goes well, the next step will be to give it a coat of clear polyurethane, and then we can start adding the decals. So let's see what it looks like with all the tape off. I've got all the tape off, and it looks really good. Nice sharp demarcation lines. And I've got the rudders and the ailerons and the elevators on, so you can see how it looks. It's looking pretty good. And so one of those ailerons might fall off. There's the I can't really get a, there we go, the landing lights. So the next step is to go ahead and gloss it, and then we can, I'll show you how I do my decals. I've got a tutorial on it. I've got 2 tutorials on decals, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how I cut out the decals and remove the vast majority of the clear film from around the decals so that it minimizes any silvering. Even though you gloss the surface of a flat paint color, there's still a chance you can get some silvering. So what I do is I remove as much of the clear film as possible, and that reduces the likelihood of any silvering. So we are ready to do the next step, but I'm really pleased with the way the colors came out and the sharp demarcation lines. And it's going to look really striking when I do mild weathering.
This concludes part 14, and stay tuned for part 15, where we apply all the decals and I show you in detail my decaling techniques to get superb looking decals that look like they're painted onto the surface. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And when you get the chance, visit our website at www.mikeashley.com, where you're going to find dozens of free PDF downloads, including tutorials, picture references, model galleries, projects, and my 5 original scale modeling books. Thanks to Ben Sound and Videvo for the royalty-free music, and happy scale modeling!